Hello everyone and welcome to Snap Take. Today we've got a special episode. We're going to look at every deck I used to success in the 90s. This was quite the grind. We'll tell the story as we go through the video, but we're going to look at the deck I used to hit Infinite and what the 90s grind was like. We're going to kick it off with the Havok Enjoyer list. The version I played is, well, it's sort of me messing with the most recent versions until I ended up on this exact build. I found it very successful. We'll get to my win rate and such later and what the cards do and why these choices were made. But this is a very successful and powerful deck, and in my opinion, one of the most fun to play. This deck has not changed. This has fundamentally existed with various tech slots for, I don't know, months now, since what's the latest card? Since Agent Venom came out at the very least, and it is still one of the better decks in Marvel Snap. This is an update on the Burrs version of what is ultimately Derek's deck. This needs Agent Venom, Nico, and Thena. I've come around to actually just needing Nico on this. I used to say she was replaceable, but I don't believe so any longer. I think she's just too good for both the hood and her copy ability in this list and to be cut. Sage and Cassandra Nova can be Wolfsbane, Red Guardian, and Cosmo. Red Guardian and Cosmo are in fact the two tech cards that were overall cut from this list. Sage fundamentally does the same thing in this list most of the time against almost everything but Thanos. She does the same thing that Juggernaut does in the list. So you're usually choosing one of the two, or you're playing 1 on 5 and 1 on 6. Usually that will mean Juggernaut on 5 to try and clog an opponent. US Agent can be Sam Wilson, Surge, and Adam Warlock. In fact, I started out with Surge, and then I realized Surge was like just not doing anything 90% of the time in this list, and there were multiple times that US Agent would have been very powerful, particularly in the Thanos matchup. So I added US Agent for that matchup in particular, and it was worth its weight in gold for it. Outside of that matchup, there's games where it's just a dead card, but there's games when I got 1 or 0 real benefit from Surge in the deck too, or where she was very hard to play. US Agent was better. You can also obviously try Sam there. All right, let's go through card by card. First here, we have the Hood. The Hood is our card of the hardest to use here. So you have to be careful of two real things with the Hood. First, you don't ever want to play that 1 -3 unless it's the last turn and you just need that extra card to get out for whatever reason. The other, I don't, hopefully you can't hear the random horn happening outside my apartment. But the other thing to note is that Bast is the one of the two cards that can take care of the Hood problem without while it's in hand. Once you've drawn Hood, it's either Bast or Nico turning it into a demon, or Nico using it to destroy and draw 2. That are your ways to get rid of the Hood. Again, unless it's like turn 5, turn 6, and you know 100% what your throw lane is going to be, like they got an early Iron Man or Infinite through whatever reason, then you don't really want to mess with the Hood as a -3. If you haven't drawn the Hood, however, Agent Venom is amazing. That is a 6 power swing from just that Agent Venom, so you get to play a 2/5 that gives you a 6 power swing that gives you a 1/6. All of those things in combination are absolutely, absolutely incredible. Bast has a million good targets in this list. I still try and hold it for Hood because I do want that 1/6 very much. You have to be very careful not to play Hood and then play Bast with the Demon in hand. I was able to beat quite a few people that were playing this deck that managed to make themselves lovely 1/3 demons. Do your best not to do that, please. But Bast's main target, like it's great for Havok, it's great for Thena, it's great for Sage without any question. It's actually kind of huge with Sage because Sage gets extra big at those games. But really, for Cassandra Nova played after turn 3, that starting with 3 power is an absolutely huge amount that absolutely benefits the list. Kitty Pryde is fundamentally here for Thena. It allows you to trigger Thena basically whenever you want as soon as you've drawn Kitty. So that's the main use. It's nice power. Sometimes it's 1/5, 1/6, but most of its use is for Thena. Nico, we already discussed, can handle the Hood, but her other use is generally speaking the copy spell. You mostly want to copy Sage or Cassandra Nova because they copy after their on reveal has activated. That copy leaves you an extra huge card to play and often a snap condition in and of itself. Havok is the hardest card to use in the list outside of Hood. You want to play Havok on either turn 4 or turn 5 90% of the time. I don't have a real heuristic for when you want to play it on turn 4 versus turn 5. You just have to learn when you're going to do that. Sometimes Havok on turn 4 is right, sometimes Havok on turn 5 is right. You'll get used to it as you play more. If you need the extra power, it's really useful to play it on turn 4, but you have to know matchups, you have to know board states, and so on. The other thing for Havok, that's really important here, is remember to count his actual end power. Opponents often will not. So count whether he's going to be a 2-8 or a 2-12, or if he started with 3, a 2-11 or 2-15. Those are real numbers to keep in mind as you're trying to fill a lane. I've seen people play like Havok, Thena, and Sage all in one lane. That is overkill. You will, short of Juggernaut, really struggle to win another lane. Be very careful with that kind of decision. You don't want to overload. You have 3 real scalers here. You don't want to overload them all in one spot. Thena is your only real early game scaler. You play her early and you end up growing her. I'm often curious if Thena might just want to be Angela. I feel like getting a 2-6 to 2-8 out of Angela seems reasonably good. I really wish they would buff Angela to something more reasonable at this point. She was one of the best cards in the game forever. We'll talk more about her later this video, spoiler alert. But Thena is a ton of power. Again, we're looking at a 2-9 to 11. Remember that if you think your opponent has Shang, you can skip a Thena trigger earlier in the game, usually around turn 5, because if she goes above 10 in turn 6, that will not negatively affect your deck. From there, we have US Agent. US Agent is here for big decks, for big cards. US Agent gives you some extra play, especially into Thanos. That Mockingbird lane is often the one that annoys me. People tend to put Mockingbird in the same lane as like a Wiccan as a way to get some extra power. In those games, US Agent plays as a 2-9. That's absolutely awesome. It's not amazing in every matchup. A lot of Surfer decks don't have much for US Agent to do, but it's good enough in the matchups where it is good that I think it is worth running. Do not replace it for a 3. You will find yourself short on early game if you don't have a 2 to play. If you have Sam Wilson, I think Sam Wilson is probably the best replacement. I know some people really like Surge here. Some people really like Adam Warlock here. I was not in love with either. Warlock was great when he was great, but he was so often dead late in the game. I hate having a dead draw like that. And Surge was much the same. Whereas at least Sam can move that shield and get you some extra power. Sam with even one trigger is a 2-5, which is still pretty nice. Agent Venom is huge for much the same reason Bast, while a 2-5 is also the biggest native stats in the deck, so it's decent even if you draw it late. From there, we have Cassandra Nova, who we already discussed. Cassandra Nova's negative power is really good. Copying her is really good. If you have anything that duplicates cards, she becomes an absolute lane-winning threat. She's generally speaking going to be your play on turn 3 or turn 4. If you can play on turn 2 with Thena, you tend to go, on turn 3 with Thena, you tend to go turn 4 Cassandra and another one, usually Kitty. And like as long as you basted it, that's still like a 3-8, 3-9 that gets extra benefit whenever the opponent plays those cards. Sage is your last turn play, or Juggernaut is your last turn play. You're going to have to decide fairly often. That's why you don't necessarily need to. I can see Juggernaut being cut for Red Guardian, being cut for Cosmo. The reason I didn't run Cosmo right now is that Thanos decks are running Cosmo, and 2 Cosmo lanes often ends up kind of a problem for this list. If the Thanos Cosmos and then there's another Cosmo, a lot of your cards just turn off. You don't always have enough space for all of that, and if you don't have enough space for all that, you die. So I didn't love Cosmo right now, but I could easily see Juggernaut be Red Guardian. It's still, you don't draw every card you want every game, and so Juggernaut gives you a win condition when you don't see Sage, especially in non-Thanos matchups. Sage, meanwhile, is just huge. She's really, really big stats. A lot of things have different power in this list, even with the Agent Venom stuff. You play Sage on top of like a Demon and Athena, and all of a sudden your lane skyrockets up in power and you're able to win. Luke Cage is a pure meta call. That card has been everything from Mobius to the aforementioned Red Guardian and Cosmo. I'm a fan of Luke because a lot of my early 90s journey, KM Best had just released a video talking about the Affliction deck with Ajax and Luke Cage and everything else, and adding my own Luke Cage gave me some free wins against those matchups played late. The first time I played that match, I managed to not snap my Luke, and I ended up costing myself cubes because they certainly wouldn't have run against this match, but I foolishly actually forgot why I added Luke to the list, and then I drew him, and I was like, oh, I was supposed to snap this. But yeah, make sure you snap Luke for that matchup. Outside of that, he's just really nice for certain locations that can otherwise give this deck trouble. You don't get huge, so -1s and -2 and -3 locations do cause you a bit of trouble. I went 58% with this in the 90s, 19 and 14 plus 11 cubes. That's the worst stats of anything we're going to look at, but a lot of that was just variance. A lot of that was me playing with the earlier versions of the deck. I feel like once I got to this version of the deck, it really, really did take off, and I was able to have a lot more success. Turn 1, you want to play Kitty or Past. Bast is only if you have Hood and either like definitely a Cassandra Nova or 2 other targets, then you will Bast. I tend to almost never Bast. I'd much rather have Agent Venom be a 2-5 if possible. Turn 2 is Agent Venom over US Agent. Bast and a 1 is totally fine with the same logic as turn 1. You don't love dropping US Agent on turn 2, but you're fine doing so, especially once you just try and like think of what location they've already played a card and what location they might want to play cards in. Don't be afraid to put it blind right, for example. Being able to like take even the monsters from Monster Island down to being 7 power is very good for you because you don't run Shang-Chi and opponents might, right? So them being able to Shang that monster is bad for you. Taking those monsters out of Shang range is just a plus. From there, we have Thena and a 1 over another 2+1, which is more or less equal to Cass. If you have Thena out, you're definitely trying to go 2+1. Otherwise, Cassandra Nova is totally fine. The earlier you get her, the more power she has. Turn 4 is almost always for me Cass +1 or 2+2. Learn when to Havok here versus turn 5. A lot of times that 2+2 will end up being like a Thena and a US agent for me. Getting Thena out is very important here. Sometimes you'll waste an energy here if the 1 is the right card. If you got that 1/3 hood, for example, this is a really good time to play 2 + 1/3 hood to give yourself access to a demon. Turn 5 is 3+1 or 2. This is when you're snapping. You should have a decent idea about how much power you're going to have, and you have all but one of your draws. This is generally speaking when you're looking to snap. A 3+1 or 2 is fine depending on when you played Havok. If you played not a hood yet, this is when you want to play a hood so you can get out a demon last turn. Sage or Juggernaut this turn is really good with Havok or Kitty Demon or US Agent as a general freaking rule. And then finally we have Sage or Juggernaut Plus. My reminder for the last turn is largely don't overindex on Thena. When I play against this deck, I see a lot of people not play an extra card to get a Thena trigger in a lane they've already won. Or when they're just going to play a 1/3. If you're going to play an extra 3 power, that's the same power Athena was going to get anyway. Don't worry about triggering her in those cases. It doesn't matter. Spend your energy efficiently. Try and win the game. I think this is still one of the best decks in the game. I don't think it's an A tier deck. I think it's a B tier deck that's capable of beating anything in the right circumstances. If you know what you're going to play, if you know what your meta is, you can tech to beat almost anything. This one is built specifically for both Thanos and Affliction, and I was able to have a very, very positive win rate. My climb through the 90s had a 70% win rate against Thanos. Thankfully, Untapped now gives us that data, so I had a 70% win rate throughout the 90s against Thanos. This deck is one major reason why. If you're struggling, please make sure you give it a try, but we've still got 3 more decks to look at. Before we get to the next deck, which is the one I actually hit Infinite with, please hit that sub, like, and comment if you're willing to. We give you 7 days a week here of Marvel Snap videos. We never miss a day. If you would like the best decks that are exclusive to this channel and you will get nowhere else from the best players in Marvel Snap, make sure you hit that sub, like, and comment. Liking and commenting can also enter you to win an Esme Cuckoo. We are giving away 5 Esme Cuckoos at the end of this video. We'll be giving away 1 a week for the rest of the season. All you have to do is hit sub, like, and then each video will have a question. You comment that question, you're entered to an Esme. It's just that easy. All right, this is our last chance review of Surge. I think Surge is worth buying conditionally. I am not super impressed with this card, but the majority of the game, the majority of the best players really think it's great. I think it's a good card. I think it's a good to very good card, but it falls short of great. I think it's being put in a lot of decks that don't especially want it. We're going to see some decks that feature it going forward, including the one I hit Infinite with, and it's really good in those, but I don't feel like it's irreplaceable. And what's more, we have data mines, which could change, of Mr. Fantastic First Steps, the season pass card coming in July. That's a 2/3 that gives a card in hand randomly either -1 cost or +2 power at the end of each turn. That's probably better Surge. And if it's not better Surge, they're going to buff that to be better Surge, right? And once that's the case, are we playing both? Because I don't think so, right? We're not going to play 2 cheap cards that we must play on curve for them to really have effect. If that's the case, then all of a sudden Mr. Fantastic is just the better play, or will be buffed to be the better play, and now Surge doesn't have a home. So if you want Surge, I think she's going to be really, really good for the next 2 months. I think she's probably going to go in a lot of decks because a lot of top players like her, and one of the ways you get cards into decks, one of the reasons you see cards more often than not is that top players find them powerful and interesting. So I think you're going to see a lot of Surge, but I don't think she's a required buy because I think she's a temporarily fairly required card. Next up, this is the deck that I crossed over to Infinite with. You've seen this, a version of this. I got an Infinity border with last season. I built this deck around December. And in December, I was able to, this became the best Surfer deck for quite a while. Over time, other versions, like deck got more powerful, other versions of Surfer were really good. And then Splat, our good friend Splat, released a deck, sent me a deck that was a Surfer deck that was running Captain Carter, and then a bunch of buff cards, but not like it was running Sera and some other stuff. I was like, well, what happened to my deck? I never added Captain Carter to it. Captain Carter was a 4 when she came out, and I never thought to add her because of that. So what happens if I add Captain Carter? And then this deck immediately became the second most successful Surfer deck in the game. And so as I was playing it, I played this in the 90s. I was like, I've got America Chavez. What happens if I have Surge? If Surge like ever hits good, if Surge ever hits well, she's so strong in this list. So I decided to run Surge fundamentally for two reasons. One, early Galacta is incredible, right? If I get an early Galacta, I'm in heaven. The other thing she offers me two more things. If it hits, for example, a Killmonger or a Phastos or Nakia, I can play one of those with a 2-drop on turn 4. So my turn 4 can be like a Phastos and a Forge now, which is obviously a very powerful play, right? If I don't see Galacta, that's something really important to do. And the other thing it does is Okoye and Surge, well, Okoye Forge is great late, but Okoye is not great on turn 5. But if you surged one of your 3s on turn 5, a lot of times my turn 5s would then be like um Sebastian Shaw and Killmonger, and now all of a sudden we're really cooking. The other change I made is I got Red Guardian for Killmonger. This deck is weak to ongoing stuff. It just is. It's usually not going to beat the best ongoing decks, but it can compete with almost anything else because it's putting up multiple 30 power lanes. One of the things that really does give it trouble is a bunch of 1-drops. A bunch of 1-drops get really annoying. They get really frustrating. Clog really annoys this list. Killmonger takes care of that problem. It turns a negative matchup into a plus matchup and lets you snap it, so I decided to add Killmonger. You could easily add Nova because you added Killmonger, but what I found what Nova does is tell the opponent, yay, I'm running Killmonger, and now you're no longer as effective snapping. So I found more use for Killmonger alone. We'll go into more detail when we go card by card, but this deck is mine, twitch.tv/PulseGlazer. We need Galacta, Carter, Makari, and Shaw for this list. Sorry about the need of Makari. Makari is just, she's too much power for free because you can hit her with Phastos, you can hit her with you can hit her with anything. She works with Surge when you hit it. You hit her with Okoye. You hit her in hand with Nakia. Any of these are buffs, and now you got like a 3/6 for free that you can further buff the Surfer to like a 3/8. It's just too good to not have. The other 3 required cards I'd like to note are season pass cards. So if you can afford the season pass, I once more urge you to do it because Galactic, Carter, and Shaw are all season pass cards, and owning season pass cards does make your deck building job exponentially easier. Surge can be US Agent, America Chavez. I also think Surge is fine as Nova, but again, I wouldn't necessarily do that. I did think Surge was very good in this list, although you're not really chaining her necessarily. You're trying to use her for specific hits. Remember that the power of those specific hits for Carter is a +3 if you fill both back lanes. For Brood is a +3 because that's 3 Broodlings. And then for Shaw, it's a +3 buff too. So getting a +3 buff for that one Surge makes her far more palatable to me. Phastos can be Red Guardian, Gladiator, Juggernaut, so on. Phastos is mostly what I want to play on turn 3, but like he's not so important that you can't do without. Nakia does mostly the same job. We'll get to that as we talk through things. So Forge is an okay play on turn 2. I tend to hold Forge reasonably often on turn 2. I don't love Forge on Nakira Fastos because that's just turning Forge into a +2. Whereas I play Forge on Brood, it's a +6, or a Carter, it's a +6. Or Shaw, it's a +4. So I'd rather get that bigger buff, either doubled or tripled by holding Forge, but it's still fine on turn 2. Sometimes you don't have Fastos and Nakia, but you do have a Shaw or Brood. Shaw is the one I would most like to play early of those. Brood tends to fill my space, while Carter gives my opponent time to figure out what lanes to play and encounter. So I like to Shaw first of those if possible. I will almost always play Okoye over Surge. Assuming my deck is good, assuming I have key cards in my deck, if I have any of the 3 key buff card targets, Brood, Carter, and Shaw in my deck, Okoye is the card I really want to play on turn 2. Because guaranteeing them that +1 without having to worry about chaining or anything else means that Okoye is playing for like a 2/7, 2/8, 2/9 fairly often. If you just play Brood, Okoye is a 2/6, right? If you play Brood and one other card, 2/7, Brood and 2 other cards, 2/8, that's great stats, and those amps are really easy to mess with opponents because they tend not to think of Brood as a 3/3, right? Surge does a similar thing to Brood. That extra cost value is again getting a Galacta out early, getting 2 4s, usually with Forge as the second, out on turn 4. Sorry, getting 2 2s out on turn 4, one of those being a 3, think a Nakia and a Forge on turn 4. And then on turn 5, having an extra 3, again, like Fastos, like Killmonger, that you can play with a Shaw on turn 5. Any of those are absolutely worthwhile and worth running Surge for. Brood is huge power. You can don't feel like you have to buff Brood. There are two ways to so Brood can get buffed plenty without the Surfer buff or the Galacta buff. So sometimes you're gonna play Okoye. Okoye is gonna hit Brood. You're gonna play Nakia. Nakia is gonna hit Brood. You've now got a Surfer Brood, right? You don't have to overstress it, especially if you're going to play the card behind Carter. That is enough power to win most lanes as long as Carter is buffed. If Carter's a 3-5 and Brood's a 3-4, you've just got two 9 power cards in the back. Be wary with priority. Sometimes Carter gets so big that you're going to end up shonking yourself in the face when they do this, but outside of that, you should be really, really powerful. I lost quite a few games to Shang. It was very annoying. I strongly considered adding Cosmo before deciding against it because I want to brood that lane. All right, then we've got Surfer. Surfer is your late game buff. Let's come back to Surfer. Killmonger is here to help against Thanos and to handle junk. There was just enough junk / clog to be annoying. There was just enough debris. There was just enough hood being sent over to Tanya, so on. I can now snap those matchups thanks to Killmonger. I can snap, and then when I get rid of that stuff, I have enough space to really compete because then their only real clog card tends to be Green Goblin, which is annoying, right? But Green Goblin's still a 1 power card once I -1 once I surfer it, and that's not the end of the world. I can still win that lane pretty easily because I have a ridiculous Brood, Carter, and Shaw to play. So Killmonger turns negative matchups into positive. This deck feasted on Thanos. I had very, very little trouble with Thanos. Once they Cosmo lane, I was able to get Carter lanes well over the top of Cosmo Strange Supreme decks. It wasn't really a problem, and that just meant I didn't have to worry about protecting those lanes, which is really nice. Nakia is so you're playing Nakia or Fastos on turn 3 almost every game if you can. You're playing Nakia if you have 2 of Brood, Carter, and Shaw in hand. You're playing Fastos if not. If you don't have Galacta, you're going to play 1 on 3 and 1 on 4 just fine. And in those cases, I tend to go Fastos first because getting the discount is so important, potentially, for later in the game. But Nakia ends up playing, again, just hitting Brood, she is playing for 3-6. Just hitting Shaw, she is playing for 3-6, right? So like we understand that Nakia is extremely powerful on hitting any of these targets, and if she can hit multiple, even better. Same thing for Fastos, except his buff is even bigger, although you are taking the variant chance. There's a lot of games where Fastos does fundamentally nothing by giving you a discount on a card you didn't really give a shit about getting a discount on, like Makari. Makari and Surge do work together. If Makari hits the buff and plays herself after Surge, that will continue your Surge chain. Fastos, you get absolutely no benefit at that point, and it royally sucks. You're like, why couldn't I get the +2? Come on. But yeah, those two are your early choice of play. Then we have Shaw. Shaw is really, really good. He's a ton of power here. He's fundamentally like if I'm gonna get a lane shunged, I will make a really, really big Shaw, and it's not hard because like you hit it with like an Okoye and an Nakia. Okoye, you now have a 3-7. Nakia, you now have a 3-10, right? Because each one is +3 on him, and you just sort of stick that in the lane because if you play Surfer on it, you now have a 3-14. That's like a lane that that opponents have to recognize as a threat in most games, especially if played with 1 or 2 other 3s. Feel free to throw like if you play that in like your Nakia lane or your Fastos lane or whatever, they can often shung that Shaw because they're like, I got it. And then when you Surfer, you're buffing the Fastos or Nakia above the realm of where you'd have to worry about it, and then you should be able to win. And then Galacta is just like this huge buff. Again, don't be afraid to split Galacta and Forge buffs as you've got other buffs in the deck. Sometimes I will like Galacta a Shaw, but not Galacta and Forge a Shaw, or Galacta a Brood. Remember that Galacta also is better on Brood and Carter than she is on Shaw because Shaw gets +2 no matter what. They get +3 per, so you get that extra benefit from Galacta on those. Outside of that, she's just so much power. You're really, really happy to have her. And Surfer works much the same way as Galacta. Because Surfer is only giving 2, that 2 matters the same. It's again doubled on Shaw, right? Like it's +4 on Shaw, whereas +6 on the other 2 cards if you can fill them. Surfer's incredible. A lot of games you're gonna win by not playing Surfer though, so don't be afraid to like even use Surfer first and then play your like Brood behind Carter. If you use Surfer first, play your Brood behind Carter, that's gonna let you avoid Shang-Chi a lot of the times, which is just again going to be an awful lot of power. Don't be afraid to be sort of tricky with that. Generally speaking, at the end of the game, I want to play Carter on turn 5 or 6. Brood and Surfer on and then Brood and Surfer or vice versa, and that should be enough to win most games of Snap. Remember that Makari could clog you, and keep that in mind as you choose to play your cards. With this list, I went 16-8, 67% win rate, and +26 cubes. That is over a 1 cube average. remember, actually, let's save it for the next deck. When we get to the next deck, I'm going to talk about my experience in the 90s this season. Turn 1, you pass. Turn 2, Okoye over Surge over Forge. Turn 3, Fastos equals Nakia, depending on what your hand is, over Carter. If you have to play one of the cards early, I like it to be Carter because then you can just stack up like a Galacta behind Carter and chill. Turn 4, Galacta is better than a 3. You're not snapping the 3, you are potentially snapping Galacta. Turn 5, Forge, or a 3 that costs 2 thanks to Fastos or Surge, and a power 3. This is Carter, Brood, or Shaw, those are your power 3s. Then turn 6 is a power 3 and Surfer, or double power 3. Reasonably often, if I have Carter out, I will, or if I have a lane that I know they're not competing in for whatever reason, I will just go Galacta on Carter with Brood behind it in one turn and just go beat that. And remember, that's at least you've got the 5 from Carter, right? Plus 7, 14 from 2 Broods. So you just played 19, 21 power in that lane, and that's assuming you had no other buffs from all your other stuff on those cards. So you just get that out of completely nowhere, and remember that you can steal cubes that way. If you didn't get it, I love this deck. I think it is severely underrated and much more powerful than people give it credit for. It's one of the better decks into the meta because Thanos can very often just straight up not deal with the amount of power this puts out. I love this list. Give it a try. If you would like to, please check out a stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/PulseGlazer. I have not streamed this weekend yet. I've been doing Mother's Day things with my wife, but happy Mother's Day to any mothers out there or people who yeah, happy Mother's Day to any mothers out there. I should still be streaming today. My wife would mostly like to be left alone on the day of Mother's Day to just unwind and not be bothered. So after spending the weekend together, so I should be streaming today. Try and come check me out. Hopefully around 1 in the afternoon is when I'm aiming to stream. So check out twitch.tv/PulseGlazer. Our season pass question is simply how has your season gone so far? And I'm just going to answer how my season has gone so far now, as promised. So I hit the 70s relatively quickly, and the 80s were a bit of a slog. And then in the 90s, all of a sudden I got a million bots in the 80s, I all of a sudden got a million bots in the row, and I just cleared the 80s with like 4 or 5 bots in a row. I got to the 90s, and all of a sudden I got cheating bots. I've never had bots beat me, like bots that could play Marvel Snap. So I play bots very particularly in order to steal 8 cubes from them because why the hell not, right? I know they're not going to try and win, da 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 da. But I've mentally trained myself that this is the way. So I got to the 90s on stream on, I don't know, Thursday, I believe, maybe Wednesday. Time runs together a bit. But I got to maybe Tuesday even. I don't remember. I got to the 90s on stream. Cool. And then I immediately got cheating bots, and the bots knocked me down to 88. I had to then play a bunch of real people. I climbed back to 93. And then I decided, you know what? I'm tired. I'm going to take a rest. And then I took a rest. And I didn't have much time to play on Thursday because Thursday was the podcast and we only had a short stream. So I ended up at 93 for Friday when I decided to climb to Infinite. My climb to Infinite had, and I counted, 3 bots. One, I got 8 from one, the very last game I played. One I got 2 from, and one retreated for 1. I was unsure if the earlier bots, the one that retreated for 1 and the one that I got 2 from, were cheating bots or not. So I was very careful playing against them because now I can't just like abuse bots on my way to Infinite. The last bot I just knew I had a winning hand for, so I didn't like. I don't know if it was a cheating bot or not, but it didn't have a play that beat me. It was the location that floods the left and the right, and they got an Infinite in one of those lanes, but I had one of those stupid big Carters, and I was able to win both the left and right lane before that happened. And then they wanted to play a Magneto mid, but I was able to clog mid enough that I was still able to win. So I ended up getting Infinite that way. But there were very, very few bots. And this is not a conversation just I've had. This is a conversation I've had with a lot of creators. People are like, some people are still seeing bots left and right, right? But a lot of people that usually would never see bots just got a million non-bot games this season, and the infinite grind was very, very real and very, very intense. Things got a lot harder. Also, it felt like real players were retreating a lot more on early snaps, so I was getting 1 cube where I used to get 2 or 2 to 4, and thus the infinite climb was sort of an ordeal. I still, again, had these 4 decks in the 90s that I was very successful with, but it took a lot more games at a lot more reasonable of a win rate. I'm usually like an 80% win rate to Infinite than it usually would. Let me know how your climb has gone. Are you Infinite? Are you not Infinite? How has your climb gone? How many bots are you seeing? How do you feel? The easiest way right now for me to tell bots, by the way, is I'm about 35,000 CL. If the opponent's name is like Bob or Tim or whatever single first name, and they have my exact CL, they're a bot. All right, winners of Esme. PG Eric, Zen and Seren, Old Man Nix, Hyper Twink, and Swedish Zombie, congratulations on Esme. Remember, we will be giving away one a week for the rest of the season. The 5 of you, please reach out in order to claim your season pass. Next up, Zombies Go Nom Nom, Sera Monkey. This was my second most successful deck, and I think my most successful cube deck. This one's a beaut. Uh, Alexa decided I was talking to it, but Zombies had a wonderful, wonderful, and powerful list that I had a lot of success with. I talked about this one a little bit in Thursday's Surge video, but playing it more, I found just a ton of success with it. This has got me through the early 90s. Fundamentally, one of the more powerful things I played early on. You can find Zombies at youtube.com/@zombiesgonomnom. He's the same name on Twitch, except the S in Zombies is a Z. This needs Hitmonkey, Sam, Elsa, and Gwenpool. Those 4 cards are required. I thought you didn't need Elsa, and upon playing it more, Elsa's just too much power in this list. Sam is your early power spike, and Gwenpool is incredible, particularly for Mysterio, who will keep all the buffs, which means one hit turns Mysterio into a 2/10. Red Guardian can be Rogue here, and Surge can be Mirage, Cable, Kate, or Beast. I'm actually partial to Beast. Surge felt fine here, but I basically never got the early Sera. I got the early Gwenpool once, so meh. Kitty Pryde is great. This is when I told you we'd talk about Angela. Angela feels really solid here. Even playing her late in a Sera list, I'm still able to get enough power to turn her into like a 2/6, which is perfectly fine, right? You're very happy to play a 2/5, 2/6. If you can play her early, and sometimes you do, sometimes she's better than Surge. If you've got Sera and Gwenpool in hand, or Mysterio and Monkey in hand, and you're like, you can always just throw an Angela out if you've already got Kitty going and get that power going. Or you can go Surge into Angela and Kitty if you don't have Bishop or you don't think Mobius is going to do anything. So that kind of thing is very useful. Angela is really, really good here. Kitty is here largely for Angela and for Bishop. Bishop is actually amazing here. I forgot how good Bishop is with Mysterio. As long as you play Mysterio, Bishop is already a 2/5. Assuming you played a card on turn 4 and a card on turn 5, and you're able to get Bishop out on 3, you've now got a 3/7, and that's before you get those last couple cards out, which is really, really nice. Bishop at the end of the game with Hitmonkey and Mysterio is really good as well. That is 5 energy, so you can still play a Surge, Sam, Angela, or Kitty, which means you are playing Bishop first, right? Monkey, Mysterios, and then one more card, so you're getting +5 power. You've now got a 3/7 out of nowhere, which the opponent probably wasn't planning for. Really, really good in the real Mysterio lane as well, because now you've just played 11 power in a lane, while your Monkey's also going to be like 13 power in a different lane. Those cards work amazingly, amazingly well together. Mysterio and Bishop are a pair. Hitmonkey and Bishop are a pair. Those cards together work exceedingly, exceedingly well. Mobius is here for specific matchups where he just sort of auto wins you the game. There was an occasional negative I'd see, and Mobius was good. If you can get Mobius out early enough against Thanos, he's good. But I swear to God, every time I would want a Mobius on 3 against Thanos, that's when they just cold drop a Mockingbird, which is ridiculously obnoxious. But it is still a very, very powerful card. Oh, Surge can also be Gorgon, because Thanos is, again, 20% of my games were Thanos. 20% of my games were against Thanos. On my way to Infinite in the 90s. Red Guardian is your answer card. It is the only real tech proactive, I guess reactive. Mobius is proactive. Reactive tech card in the deck. It's really, really good on turn 3. Sometimes it just blows up a Strange Supreme or something and you're pretty happy. Elsa's a ton of power. Remember that you're running Mysterio, so you're fairly likely to fill all locations. This is an amazing fill all 4 locations deck, thanks to Mysterio. Elsa gives you some benefit for doing that. Remember that if you are filling every location with Elsa, she is fundamentally, or she or Mysterio, as you care to add, is adding 6 extra power, which makes her a 3/10. 3/10 is a lot. Kitty Pryde also getting multiple buffs from her is very, very good, and sometimes that'll end up being your play. That is often a turn 4 play instead of Gwenpool if you don't have Mysterio. If you don't have Mysterio, Gwenpool is fine, but I generally speaking rather play the Elsa game and get the extra power that way. Just an extra 2 power there ends up being, I guess it's not amazing, but it's still pretty damn solid, especially if you can start doing that in multiple lanes going forward. Gwenpool is here for Mysterio, but it's also just 6 power. You tend to play most of your damn hand, and whenever Gwenpool hits, you're just now more likely to play, especially if you see Sera, who's the most important card on the list. Sera turning everything into an insane endgame play is amazing. And otherwise, look, Mysterio, Hitmonkey, and Kitty is a fine last turn. That's still 4 plays for Hitmonkey, which is +8 power, which is a 3/11, which you're fine with, right? But Sera lets you turn Hitmonkey into a 13 or 15 power card, and yeah, that's better. All right, 64% win rate, 18 and 9 plus 30 cubes. This one felt great. Turn 1 Kitty, Sam over Surge, which is more or less equal to Angela, depends on your hand. Turn 3 is Bishop, which is more or less equal to Mobius or Red Guardian, depending on your targets or what your opponent's playing, over Elsa. Turn 4, Gwenpool over a 3. Remember that if you think they're negative, you can drop Mobius over Gwenpool on turn 4 and be totally fine. Turn 5, Sera is better than a 3+2. Sera is your main snap condition. Gwenpool can be a snap. You're basically snapping if it hits Mysterio a bunch, and that's going to win. And then turn 6, Mysterio plus Monkey and whatever else you can. Cool. This list felt very, very good once more. I urge you to give it a try. Still very good against Thanos. And what's really, really nice is people are expecting tech. So they sort of play around you like Shangs and Enchantresses and stuff with this. And then you just drop cold, hard power at the end of the game. If you're interested in checking out some gameplay outside of me, the great O Behaved should be live later, except I don't have that slide here. For whatever reason, I moved it wrong. My bad. Check out O Behaved on stream when you can. Obi is great and doing a ton of giveaways right now. He sent me a bunch of stuff for it, but I told him to send me a slide, so I got to get to that. The last deck I played in the 90s was Negative. The reason this is last is this list felt really, really good against almost everything except Thanos. This one didn't feel quite as good against Thanos. Cosmo was actually genuinely super annoying, as was the Reality Stone. Between Cosmo and the Reality Stone, this deck could run into trouble. I decided to play this version, however, because again, remember in the early 90s, as I talked about at the beginning, all of a sudden, when Cam released that video, I was getting a ton of Affliction. And Super Skrull was basically auto-winning me that Affliction matchup. They play Luke Cage, they play Ajax, they play whatever else, and then Super Skrull was able to steal me a ton of extra cubes. Unfortunately, the Zoo version of Thanos also plays Super Skrull, and that became much less of a positive matchup when all of a sudden they had my Iron Man, Gore, and so on. I also tried to play some Affliction, and the Zoo Thanos' Super Skrull gave me fits. So keep that in mind as you're playing this, but this list is capable of winning even without negative, thanks to the Season Pass card Esme Cuckoo, who felt incredible in this list. We'll talk about that momentarily, but first you can find me on youtube.com/@SnapJudgesPod. This version is the standard negative in, my particular alterations, which are very few, right? I decided to keep Sage and Super Skrull over Cass for the spot. I've seen Super Skrull be the cut. I've seen Sage be the cut. I've seen people still running Wong in it. And let me just say, when they Wong and I Super Skrull, that feels real nice. Stuff like that. This deck needs both Gore and Ravonna. Those are non-negotiable. Psylocke may want to be Surge. I haven't tested that, but it may want to be Surge. I'm a little worried about that interaction with Ravonna, although I guess -1 equals -1. Sage and Esme can be Wolfsbane and Cassandra Nova. I do think you really want Esme for your negative decks from now on. So Psylocke is here largely to get you that Mr. Negative, but if you get Ravonna or like a double Ravonna late in the game through any silly means like the double ongoing location or whatever else happens, then Psylocke all of a sudden becomes this really powerful late game play, and she was able to win me some late play games that way by giving 1 extra energy where I needed it. But generally speaking, she's just sort of worse Ravonna in terms of getting negative out early. In fact, if you really wanted to instead run Cassandra and cut Psylocke, you could do that. The reason I'm keeping Psylocke here is because I would like to get that card out of my hand on turn 2. Hand clog is real for this deck, and I want to Esme on 3, and I don't want to clog my hand. Any sort of location that adds things to hands can be a problem, and Psylocke coming out on turn 2 no matter what really does help this deck. Ravonna is better Psylocke. It works not only obviously with Mr. Negative, but working with Mystique, Sage, Iron Man, Gore, and Taskmaster are all incredible. In particular, being able to play Gore on turn 5 opens up a lot of extremely powerful turn 6 plays. For example, you could Mystique and then Sage. You can still play Taskmaster on Gore on turn 6 and pull that out of the way, and that kind of thing wins a lot of games of Snap. But you need Ravonna for it. Mystique is Mystique. It's here for Iron Man and Gore. You don't really ever want to copy anything else, although occasionally you'll want to copy Super Skrull when the opponent is doing silly things. Feel free to Mystique Super Skrull and then just basically auto-win, snap that shit. But copying Mystique and Gore is incredibly powerful. She's also obviously an amazing negative target. Mystique is fundamentally key to winning when you don't see negative. Along with Esme Cuckoo, let's skip ahead to Esme for 1 second. Esme is the other card that can just sort of auto win you the game. You play Esme, it gives you like a Gore Iron Man, then you draw that Gore Iron Man, right? So on turn 5, you play Gore Iron Man thanks to Ravonna. And then turn 6, you get a second Gore Iron Man or a third Gore Iron Man with Mystique, and now you're just really kicking all sorts of butt because now you hit an extra 3/4 surprise Gore Iron Man, extra 3/4 surprise Taskmaster. So you played Gore on 5, now you played Taskmaster and Sage, and you're just like or Mystique to copy Gore and Taskmaster from Esme, and now you're just sort of kicking butt. Mobius was in just enough Thanos decks as well to give this a problem. Again, this one felt wild into everything but Thanos. Basically, you snapped and they ran, or they snapped and you ran was fairly often how things went. Sage is last turn keyword big. If there's a double on reveal location, she's last turn keyword huge, but just having Sage as a 3, as in the first deck, is an incredibly powerful thing. Magic is a card you almost always want to play here. Try and save her for turn 5 where possible, but sometimes there's just going to be bad locations or obvious reasons to need Magic. Esme Cuckoo we talked about as far as getting you late game cards, but the other thing she does is occasionally she's a 3/4 negative, and 3/4 negative feels huge. That happens more than you would think because you're almost always playing her on 3 when negative's not in hand, and thus great stuff happens. You can hold her in hand, obviously, but playing her and not playing her is the exact same thing for hand space, right? If you play her, you get a card in hand. If you don't play her, you have a card in hand. Same thing. Negative is negative. I don't know. You know what negative does. Remember not to double negative. That'll put everything back to normal. Super Skrull is here largely for the Affliction matchup, and it's pretty good against Thanos ongoing. Occasionally a shock win because no one expects Super Skrull for whatever reason ever, including me against Thanos Zoo because I'm an idiot. Iron Man is just huge power. Iron Man goes in every negative list when it's an 05. It wins you a crap ton of games. I was able to win a few Mobius games because Iron Man was a 5/5. When like Iron Man's a 5/5, they drop Mobius. I now have this 5/5 that I can happily play. I just played a 5/5 Iron Man and then I can still copy with a 3/3 Mystique or whatever, or even a 3/0 Mystique, and I'm still pretty likely to win that game. Or sometimes Gore can just win that game, for example. Jane is here again largely to get all the negative 0 cost cards into your hand. When you play Jane, even if you've got all the big cards in hand, do yourself a favor and snap. People will generally run from Jane. People tend not to keep an eye on your hand size. So if they see that you after you Jane, suddenly your hand is full. It doesn't matter that your hand was full before. They don't really know that, and you can get a snap off. Gore is the biggest 6 in the game in negative. A either 3/4 Gore or a 06 Gore are both game-winningly stupidly huge. And then you generally want a Taskmaster Gore, but don't be embarrassed to Taskmaster a Mystique copy of Gore, a Sage or a Taskmaster, or even a Jane Foster. Any of those are reasonable stats in the right situations. I had a 57% win rate with this, and straight up negative is not supposed to have a high win rate, so that felt silly. I was 16-12 with 15 cubes, which is the lowest cube rate of anything, though. Turn 1 pass. Turn 2 Ravona over Psylocke. Turn 3 negative over Esme over Magic. Turn 4 negative over Esme over Magic over Iron Man. Turn 5 negative if you already played Magic and have Jane in hand over Gore. Turn 6 you go off, you play all the stuff. If you played Gore, you can play Task or Mystique and Mystique and Iron Man, or Mystique and Sage, as the case may be. Don't forget that you can do this on turn 6 or turn 7. This feels really good. I love negative Rizalg. It's a very, very powerful list. Again, as Mobius ebbs and flows in the meta, next week I expect to be a lower Mobius week because Prodigy will release. Negative should rise. I feel like this deck is probably too consistent right now. Thank God Mobius is around. Question of the day. Strangerson712 says, in my brief time on the stream, I saw you often hold back on playing Surge and Surged cards early, even when they weren't Juggernaut or Hazmat or other comparable late plays. Have you tried committing to her, playing her cards as often as possible and seeing how well that works? I feel like that's a good way to lose games in Marvel Snap. Marvel Snap is very, very much play what's right for the situation as a game. There are only 6 turns. I talked about this with Lambie as we were talking about how the card was performing early on, and like because there are only 6 turns in Marvel Snap, saying I got 1 extra energy, I could play this earlier and I kept the chain going now, doesn't always lead to like enough extra power to be worth it. In some decks that's the case, right? But you have to build specifically for that deck, and I'm not sure that deck is common, right? Like I'm not sure that you want to just be cold dropping early man things over an early over playing an anti-venom to keep a chain going. I don't think that's generally a worthwhile thing to do. That might win you a couple more games once in a while, but it's going to lose you a lot more cubes, and it's going to build some really troubling habits. Again, Surge is sort of useless if not played by turn 3 most of the time, but I feel like Surge messing up your draw order too much is why she's got sort of a middling win rate right now, because a lot of people are just sort of messing with her and playing her willy-nilly and then following up on her with whatever. But playing cards as you just draw them in Marvel Snap is not generally speaking a very good strategy for success. There's the stream team thing. I told you, oh behaved, it's Sunday. Also make sure you check out Fothler Newman. He'll have a video on his YouTube of yesterday's decks. Hey, if you're interested on our Patreon, please check out patreon.com/snapjudgments. Certain tiers of support come with honor. Thanks. Thank you to Bricks2Click, our patron of the month, Abigail Gieselin, the AG, Mandatory Burnout, It Regardless, LAB, Inc., Am Frostman, Houghton Avenete, Thinking Poker, Primed Ryan Burke, and Ryan Wood, Ren Wrench, Caretixley, Koirei, Kazushi, Archangel 3K, Black Dahlia, Pyrofroze, The Goat Seeker, Code, Hallowed, Only Fox, Synth, Fat Nick, Absolute Shannon, how you doing? Nightmare, Dirty Casual, Mr. Kerfuffle, Cables, Jinja Prime, Philip Rakovich, Philly, Haplo, Kenny Loggins of the Danger Zone, The Bizza, Black Jeebus 23, Extra Feet, and Skippy G, Rhyming Friends, Jessica Camel, Sup Jess, Mr. Slush Death, The King of Bros, Bro, The Great Kazoo, Werewolf, Kepsi Hoda, Ludacris, Clam, Colonel Foreman, Rob Silverman, M. Holland, David G. Wingfield, Stephen Brian Kaufman, Tristan H. Martin, Jason B., Mr. Craig Sterry, Matt V., Corey, Corwin, John Q, and Jimmy McQ, Gistout, Ace Age, One Big Man, Bookman for Reals, Reapter, BG, Quid Pro Joe, Snap Decisions Joe, Dick Carlo, Mod Supreme Models, Pickety Boom Bot, Green Goblin, Unibot, Flan 56, The Fuzzy Lump, Spectrumix, Hoot, Ocularis, Matt H, DJ, Mikey Hijinks, No Frickin' Flex, Nikki the Greeky, Geeky, Toxic Soul King, who I whooped with that the deck I hit Infinite with in Snap Judgment's League. Gotcha Toxie, Zodrex, the King of Canada, 10-Man Falcon, Newman, Fowler Newman, Jonesy of the Triple Threat, y'all, Two Ties, who wears two ties, the great Lormer Devs of the Snap on This podcast, the Pirate King Tucker, new data, go follow him, make sure you show some love, and of course Gunny T, where the T stands for Marvel Snap as a tournament. We should probably talk about that soon and what that means for us in the Snap Judgments League. Peace.